Welcome to HTML and CSS Fundamentals 1. My name's Delioke and I'm going to take you through this course. So let's get started. Number 1, HTML syntax and structure. Understanding the syntax and structure of HTML is vital for you to be able to make your way through it. The latest version of HTML is HTML version 5, and that's what we're going to be looking at. I'm using Visual Studio Code. So first of all, let's make a folder for yourself. I've already done that. I'm going to open up the folder I've made on my desktop. I've called my folder online course and select. All the files in your folder will appear here. You probably don't have any. I've got an images folder already. I want to make our first HTML page. I'm going to call this index.html. First page on your website should always be an index page. It may not end in .html depending on how your server has been set up. But here we are using HTML. Okay. So now let's create an HTML page. We are using HTML version 5, and the first thing that should appear on your top of your page is the doc type. Exclamation mark doc type HTML. Doc type is not case sensitive, but that's what any browser will look at to know what version of HTML you're using. So that should always be the first thing on your page. Then we want to create the rest of the HTML document. Now, Visual Studio Code is helping me create a lot of this code. I will put a link in the description to where you can get a copy of all this code at the end of the course. Okay. So here you have a complete HTML page, and let me go through this so that you understand it. What you have on line 1 is your doc type. Must always be the first thing on your HTML page. Tells the browser what version of HTML you're using. Current version is HTML version 5. Then we've got the HTML tag. And if I highlight that on line 2, you can see it also highlights line 12. And that's where the HTML tag starts and ends. The HTML tag is your root element. Everything inside your page will go in beside those two tags. So you should always have them there. Tags have attributes and attributes have values. Now, when it comes to tags, let's start with tags first. There are two types of tags. You've got container tags and empty tags. Understanding that will help you a lot with your HTML. Container tags are tags that contain other tags. So your HTML tag on line 2 ends on line 12. It contains all the other tags. It's a container tag. And it's the first tag that you're going to make. Then you've got your head tag. You can see how I highlight that. That starts on line 3, ends on line 8. By the way, you could put all your tags on one line. It does not matter. HTML is not bothered by space. The browsers will ignore the space. The browsers are what reads your code. You're using one now to look at this page, either Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Safari if you're on a Mac. All those are browsers, and they will ignore the spaces. So the head tag is another container tag. By now you'd have probably noticed that all container tags, they have a beginning, they have an ending. So on line 3, I've got head, and it ends on line 8 with the less than sign / head. And that's how all your container tags are always open and close. So you see that with the HTML tag on line 2. We see that with the head tag on line 3. And you also have the body tag. Now, just to make this even clearer, see this little outline I've got here. I'm just going to move this up. And if you want to get the same thing as I've got, if you're using Visual Studio Code, notice I've got filter on type and sort by position ticked. So I'm just going to collapse these now, and you can see the outline of your page. Your HTML tag contains the head and the body tag. The only two children that the HTML tag has is the head tag and the body tag. Everything else in your page will go in between those two tags. So here it is on the page 2. That is my head tag. That is my body tag. Okay, so let me open up the head tag. Inside the head tag, you've got the meta tag. Now that meta tag on line 4, you should always use it. It's simply telling the browser to expect all kinds of characters coming off your keyboard because there are different characters there. So you should always use that. And that is an empty tag. Notice there's no closing tag on it. Now before HTML5, we would have closed that tag with something like that, a backslash, but we don't need that anymore. So there is your empty tag. So all HTML tags are either containers or empty. And on this page, You've seen the container tag in the HTML tag, which is your root element. You've seen it in your head tag, which there is, and your body tag. The head and the body are the only children of the HTML tag. Okay, so let's collapse all these again so we can see them. Let's open them so we can see them. Then on line 5, we've got a piece of code here that Visual Studio Code puts in. It's just telling us that this page is compatible with Internet Explorer Edge. That's very kind of it, but we don't really need that. I'm going to take that off. The piece of code that we do need, however, is on line 5, which is your viewport. Now, the viewport, it is a meta tag, but it has, so there is your tag. The tag's name always comes first, so it's the tag, the attribute name. The value is viewport, and viewport is very important because it has to do with all the other devices that people use to look at websites, like mobile devices, iPads, all those kind of things. Mobile devices like a mobile phone has a very smaller viewable area, and what this is telling us is that this text should be scaled according to the width of the device, and the initial scale will be 1.0. So it will be the normal text. The text will be scaled according to the device that is looking at it. Most people these days use their mobile devices to look at web pages, so you should always have line 5. It's a meta tag. It is again another one of those close tags. Then you have the title tag, very important. The title tag is a container tag. As you can see, it starts and it ends, and inside the title goes the title of your page. This will not appear on your page, but it's what Google will pick up when people are doing a search. So if I said welcome to HTML, there you have that text. Now, the head tag is where all the information goes that is relevant to your page but will not directly appear on your page. A bit like the head of a human being. When someone sees you, the first thing they see about you is your body, and they can tell a lot from you just by looking at your body, but they don't know what's in your head if you don't open your mouth and start talking. Same thing with a web page. The information that goes in between the head tag is a container, will not necessarily appear on your page, but it's vital to the proper functioning of your page. So if I were to open this page now, file save, we wouldn't see anything on the page. Now, to do that, I have installed an extension on Visual Studio Code, and if I just click on these extensions here and I type in here TECHER, and you can see there it's got open in browser. Now, I've installed this already. If you haven't got it installed, you'll see the little install button there. Click on that and it will install an extension that will help you view your page directly from Visual Studio Code in your browser. Very handy indeed. So I'm now going to go back to my files and I'm going to right click. Now make sure you save this page, file, save. I'm going to right click on my index.html and I'm going to say open in default browser, and there is our page. You can see up at the top there is where the title is. Nothing appears in the page. Anything that's going to appear in your page should be within the body tag. Okay. Now I'm going back to Visual Studio Code. So here we have our page. Let's come inside the body tag, and I'm going to introduce you to the H1 tag. The H1 tag is a container tag, as you can see, and it is just like the heading of a page that you will get in a book. And here I'm going to say the joys of HTML and CSS coding. Okay. So now we have some text that will appear on the page. The header 1 tag is large text, which you use to present a header. You will always be using that tag. Then you have the P tag. The P stands for paragraph. The only thing that HTML, that your browser understands, the only thing you can use with HTML to create a paragraph is the P tag. You always need tags. So if I put some text here in here now, and I'm going to use, let me put on the word wrap here. Again, I use the shortcut that Visual Studio Code uses there. Just type in LOREM and hit enter, and it will generate 50 lines of dummy text for you. So then we've got a paragraph of text. If you haven't got Visual Studio Code, you can simply type that in yourself. And there you've got a paragraph of text. Let's make another paragraph of text, another P tag. And I'm going to put in some more text. And there we are. So now I've got 2 paragraphs of text. Now, if I were to do file save now and go back to my page in the browser, simply go back and do refresh. you can see those two paragraphs of text running from one side of the screen to another. We're going to make that nice and neat very soon when we come into CSS. But here's one thing I do need to point out. If I were to go in the middle of this text and hit the return a few times and then go File and Save and go back into my page in the browser and refresh, notice that the carriage returns were ignored. The only thing the browser is going to understand is HTML tags, which is why it's important you understand your HTML tags. Back into Visual Studio Code, and here we have the layout of a standard page. We have looked at the structure of our tags. Tags fall into two groups. You have containers and empty. Now let's look at a few more empty tags, which you will use quite a bit of. Now you can see here where I've got loads of space. Spaces are ignored. So spaces are ignored. So let me introduce you to another empty tag. Another empty tag is the BR tag. Let me introduce you to another empty tag. Another empty tag is the BR tag. The BR stands for break. Now I'm going to put a word in front of this so you can say, I'm going to say break. Okay, that's that word break. Now if I were to go File, Save, and now go into my browser and refresh, you can see where the word break is. There's a line break. So BR causes a line break. The P paragraph causes a paragraph break. Another empty tag that you have is the HR tag. HR stands for horizontal rule. And that's just going to make a line across at the bottom of my page. If I save that, go back into my browser and refresh, there you've got my line going right across. So here you've been introduced to HTML, the very structure of it, how you use it to create a page, the different rules that HTML follow. You've got empty tags, you've got container tags. Tags also have attributes, and we'll look at that later on. Thank you very much. Structural tags. Structural tags help us to lay out our page and make it look nice and neat. Here's what our page looks like at the moment, and if we're to go into the browser, you see it doesn't look very neat. It runs from one side of the page to the other, and the text isn't very nice to read. So here's where our structural tags come in, which you should always use. Now we want to lay out the structure of our page, and it's going to look something like what you've got in front of you here now. So here is a mock-up diary. Here's a mock-up of what we want our page to look like. So consider the whole screen your monitor, but we want to have a nice wrapper, a nice border around our page, which is 940 in width. That's going to be the width. And then within that 940 border, we're going to have a box here, which is going to be header, another box under that, which is going to be our nav bar, another box under that, which will be where the main body of our article is, and at the very bottom, we've got our footer. And I'll put what heights we want to accomplish for those ones. Okay, so that's where we are going. So how do we take our current page, which looks like this, and transform it into something that's going to have this kind of structure with it? So I'm introducing us to the div tag. And notice here what I've got. I've got div, so that's my tag, ID equals wrapper. ID equals wrapper. The div tag is exactly like the P tag, but it's used to divide your page into divisions. And here I've introduced us to an attribute of the div tag called ID. Now ID is used for style sheets, and it can also be used in JavaScript. So I've started a div tag on line 9, but everything inside my body tag is going to be inside that div tag. I am going to end it just before the div tag, just before the body tag ends on line 17. So I've started my div tag on line 9. I've given it an attribute ID and a value wrapper. So there's an introduction to attributes. All tags have attributes. And when using attributes, you must always mention the tag first, followed by a space, then your attribute, followed by the equal sign, and then your value, which is either inside single quotes or double quotes. Double quotes is the convention. So that's div is we're gonna apply style sheets to that to make it the nice box that will be 940 in width and sit in the middle of our screen. That's what that div tag is going to do for us. So let me just save this And then after my div tag, I'm going to have a header. So header is a structural tag. A structural tag in that it is understood by search engines, by Google, that this is part of the structure of your page. So it's a bit like when you walk into a house, you've got the bedroom, you've got the sitting room, you've got the living room, you've got the toilet. They're all different rooms. And someone tells you that's the toilet, you have an understanding what's going to happen there. You don't go into the toilet to have your food in most cases. Anyway, so it's the same thing with a header. You're simply telling the search engine that what is here is heading information. You know, the things where you have things like your logo or like your standout catchphrase or things like that. So it allows search engines to index your page more intelligently. So it's very important also for SEO, search engine optimization. And so for here, we're just going to put the name of our company. Here I'm going to say company name. Okay, that's simply a piece of text. Now I've put that as ordinary text, and let me wrap that inside a tag so that it will stand out. I'm going to wrap it inside a header 2 tag. Okay, so there I've got my header 2, and I'm going to say company name. Okay. And then immediately after that, I want to have a nav bar. A nav bar is where you would have your links that go to other pages. And so every page would have a link to the home page. It would have a link to all the other pages on your site. And for now, let's make some of these up. So we are going to say products. And we're going to say feedback. So those are going to be pages that we're going to create. There are no links on them at the moment. So that is your navigation, and people will be able to click on those and go to other pages. And let me make one other link to another site. Let me say BBC, because I'm going to show you how you can do relative links and absolute links later on. Okay, so there's your links. Then the main body of my article is going to go here. And for that, I use the article structure tag. All the tags I'm introducing you to now are structure tags used to lay out the structure of your page. They will give you a lot of advantage in search engines. So the main body of my page will be inside the article tag. And that starts there where all my writing starts. And it will end where all the writing ends, which is just before where that div tag ends on line 20. Notice all the structure tags are container tags. And then after the article tag, I want the footer tag. And the footer tag is where information about your site, your work address, telephone number, email address, that kind of information will go. There's another structural tag here known as address. And the address tag is known for keeping addresses. If you put your address inside an address tag, you give the search engine a better chance of picking it up. And so here you would have the name of the address of your company. So I'm just making this address up. I'm going to say 111 No Place Road. And that is in London. And then you have a postcode after that. And let me say EE11 7RR. Okay. Followed also, you can have an email address. Okay. So your email at your company.co.uk, wherever your company is. So there you've got your address, and here you have your structural tags. And if we were to take a look at that, you will see that the structural tags do not have any design on them. So the structural tags are there, but they don't have any design. And this is where CSS comes in. Cascading style sheets help you bring style and design to your page. That's what we're going to be looking at in the next lesson. Thank you very much. Cascading style sheets. Cascading style sheets. Let me just make some notes on this. I'm going to call this notes. This is going to be a simple text file. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And the reason why it's cascading, because they cascade down in importance. So when doing style sheets, you would always start with a linked style sheet. Then you could have an embedded style sheet. And finally, you could have an inline style sheet. And they go down in importance. A link style sheet will be the first thing you have. And you can overwrite a link style sheet with an embedded style sheet. And then if you introduce an inline style sheet, that would overwrite the embedded. So the inline is the most powerful, followed by the embedded, followed by the linked, which is why you'd always start with a linked style sheet, because that means that if you then need to overwrite it, you can introduce an embedded. External style sheet resides in a separate page and ends in the extension .css. An embedded style sheet will be in the head of your page within the head tags, and it goes inside the style tags. Okay. Whereas the inline style sheet goes within the body tags, and it becomes an attribute of any of the tags that you want to apply the inline style sheets to. And we will look at all of those as we go along. But we are going to start with an embedded style sheet, and then we're going to change that into a linked style sheet. So let's go back to our HTML page, which is looking like this. And let me introduce you to an embedded style sheet. So immediately after my title, I'm going to have the style tag. And I put space there. You could write everything on one line, wouldn't make any difference. Our style sheets, looking at the syntax of a style sheet now. First of all, I'm going to make a comment tag here. See what I've done there? /star. And then I can write whatever I like here. So this is now a comment. Okay. And when it comes to style sheets, the syntax starts with your selector, followed by a curly bracket. Then you have a property. Then you have a property, followed by a colon. Then you have your value, followed by a semicolon. And you can have as many property values as you like within these curly brackets. And this whole line that we've got here is known as a rule. Okay. So you've got selector, curly bracket, property, value, semicolon. So after your property, colon, value, semicolon, then you have another property, colon, value, semicolon, and you can have as many as you like on that. So let's put this into action. On our body tag, we want to change its appearance. Remember, the body tag is where all the text appears. So I'm using my body tag as my selector. And notice when I write in the body tag there, I don't have to put any of those brackets around it. Inside CSS, that is understood as a selector. It knows what that tag is because body is a standard tag. And then I want to say font family. And I want to give it the font family Verdana. And so notice what I've got there. Font family, that's my property, colon, Verdana, that is my value, semicolon. Sometimes you will see several values there on the font family with commas behind them. And what that simply means is that if the first font is not on the machine, it will go and look for the next font. Now I could continue in this same line to put more property values in there. Let me just save this for now and come back into my browser and refresh the page. And you can see that its appearance has changed already because it has taken on a different font family. Let's go and add another property in, and I can come down a line to do this. You could write everything on one line. Where you write it just makes it easier to read if you put more space in there. I'm going to say font size. Notice that Visual Studio Code gives me nice little prompts of all the different properties that are out there. And for font size, I'm going to use 120%. Okay? Just to make the text larger. If I come back into my code and I refresh, and you can see the text has got larger. But I'm more concerned about the structure at this particular time, the layout of my page now. remember we have this div ID is wrapper and WRPPER. I want to make it wrapper, WRAPPER. Okay, whatever value you use is obviously case sensitive, and it has to be spelled. If I had left it without the A, would have made no difference at all. Just use that continuously, but let's make it wrapper. So that is now an ID. This word wrapper, I made it up. Yes, you might have seen it a lot out there. A lot of people use it, but the value names are not predefined. You can use any value name you like. You can make your own up. They shouldn't have spaces in between them, however. Okay, so that's the wrapper. So when you're referring to IDs, you refer to it with a hash sign. That allows the browser to know that you're referring to an ID, and I've called it wrapper. Okay, and then it's the same curly bracket. And this time I want to give it a maximum width of 940 pixels. Okay, that's going to be the maximum width of it, 940 pixels. And I also want to give it a margin of auto. And what that does is that after it's given it a maximum width of 940 pixels, and I explain what that means in a moment, any space left will be distributed equally on the left and the right of the page. So, of that box. So let's see, if I save this and go back into my browser and I now refresh, you can see this has now got a maximum width of 940 and the remaining space is on either sides. And this is a very neat way of doing it, because if I were to decrease the size of my window, notice it scales beautifully. So maximum is, that's the maximum it can go to, but it can go wider, but it will not get, your page can go wider, but it will never allow the text to go more than 940 pixels. Now, one of the nice tools that you have built into most browsers is if you go to the developers tools, and several ways you can get there. I'm going to right click on the page and go to inspect. And inside my inspect, you see that little tool there that says toggle toolbar. Brilliant. And by coming to that there, I can now see what this would look like in different mobile devices. So let me put this, if I were looking at this on a Pixel 5, that's what it would look like. Notice it scales quite nice. If I were looking at this on a iPhone SE, because I said a maximum width, it can go smaller, but never larger. And if on the other hand, I went to look at this on an iPad Air, okay, and let me put this on 100%, so you can see it fills the whole screen. So that's the nice thing about how you can very quickly get a page which will scale according to all the devices that come along. Let me just close that off. So there you've got your maximum width. So let's come back into CSS and do a few more things here. Now remember, we had the header up here. I'm going to put some styling on the header. So here now I simply say header, because header is a recognized tag. Okay, and my curly brackets, and I'm going to give my header a height of 50 px and a background color. For background colors, I would advise you not to use the color names directly like that, because if you use hexadecimal values, for example, so hash if I do 1 2 3 4 5 6, that's going to give me a nice pale gray. Then you can get all kinds of colors, and I will put a link in the description where you can get all the hexadecimal values. So there I've given it a height of 50 and a background color of gray. And for the navbar, let's do a similar thing. For the navbar, I am going to give you a height of 25 pixels. And for the article, now of course the height of the article is going to depend on what type of things is written into it. I'm going to give it a height of auto. So the height will be worked out according to the content that is there. And for the footer, I am going to give it a height of 25 pixels. And let's also give it a background color of the same gray, very pale gray. Okay, file save. And now let's go and look at our page and refresh. And there you are. So now you can see that our page is starting to take out a much more pleasant looking structure. Of course, it can be much more beautiful than this, but that is a good introduction to how you can use CSS as a layout. And there we have used CSS as an embedded style sheet. Now, in most cases, you want to use your CSS as a linked style sheet. I'm just going to change this into a linked style sheet now so you see how it works. Now, I'm going to make a new folder. So inside my folder that I'm in online courses folder. You've created any one you want. And I'm going to make another folder. I'm going to call this CSS. Okay. It's good habits to keep all your file types together. And inside my CSS folder, I am going to make a folder, a page which I'm going to call daily CSS, daily style.css. Okay, all style sheets should end in the extension .css. So here I'm now making a linked style sheet. And if I go into my index page that I've just created, and I take the whole of this style that is there, okay, take the whole of this, I'm going to copy, and I'm going to go into my link style sheet that I've just made, and I'm going to paste that in there. So that's all I needed to do. I have taken my style sheet out of my page, put it into my link style sheet. Notice I did not take the style tags. A link style sheet does not need the style tags. You just start putting in your rules. Remember, this whole line is a rule. Start putting in your rules. So there is daily.css. I'm going to go file save. And now I'm going to go back to my index page. And I now want to link to this style sheet. So here, outside of the style sheet tag, I'm going to type in link. And it's going to be a link to a CSS page. And so notice here, I have another empty tag. It's link. REL stands for relationship is equal to style sheet. That's all one word. Okay. So REL is my attribute. Style sheet is my value. And in this case, that value is predefined. You can't make it up. And then I've got href equals style.css. Now my style.css is inside my CSS folder. So, and this, just putting it there would not see it. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to say, and it's just made that name up, by the way. It's just called that style.css because it presumes your file will end in .css, but it doesn't know what the name is. So here's what we're going to do. Because it's in another folder, and here's how you link. You have to put in the name of the folder. Okay. Notice this helps you, / and then the name of my file, which is dailystyle.css. So now that's my style sheet. So now I can get rid of all of this. Okay, file save. So now you see what my page looks like. The style is not in my page anymore. The style is in an external style sheet or a linked style sheet. And if I were to file save and come back into my page and refresh, it should look the same. Now, just to show you that this is working, let's do this. Come back to our page. Now we go to our CSS page. What we're going to do now is for my header, where I had a background color of that light gray, I'm going to change you to black, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? So that is black. Now, the text, of course, is also black. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce another property, color. That's how you change the color of your text. And I'm going to give the color of my text here white. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the hexadecimal for white. Okay? And so now I've got white text inside my header. If I were to file save, come back into here and refresh, there we are. white text. It will look nice if I made the same thing for my footer. So let's come back into here, and for my footer, let's change the background to black. So that's the background color, and also change the color. Color is referring to the text, to white. Good. File save. Back into your page. Refresh. There you are. That's a bit large. That is an H2, but we will deal with that later. We're going to make that a bit smaller when we come into further styling up our page. But there we have had a nice introduction to CSS. And again, I'll put a link in the description where you can get that CSS code. And now we're going to move on to how we can add images onto our page. That will be the topic of our next lesson. Images on an HTML page. Page we've created so far looks like this. This is our HTML page, and if you have been following us along from the beginning of this course, you'd have seen how we created this. Now we want to go on to introduce some images to the page. Go back to my notes here just to have a few words about images. Images on a web page. When it comes to images on a web page, you've got 3 types of images that you can use. Well, 4 actually. When it comes to images on a web page, you've got 4 types of images you can use. You've got JPEGs, which end in the extension JPJ, and they support up to 16 million colors. If you were to take a picture with a digital camera, most likely you will get a JPEG. Then you've got the GIF, which starts with GIF, and that takes much fewer colors. 216 colors is what you can get with a GIF. So you've got things like clip arts, logos, black and white pictures. Those are what you get with GIFs. Then you have the PNGs, which is a recent one, and you've got 2 formats of one that would accommodate what we get in JPEGs, the other what you get in GIFs, and that's probably the way of the future, the PNGs. So whether you take a photographic image, you could save it as a PNG, it will come out well. And then finally, we've got vector images, which is SVJ, and these are generated with XML, and they end in the extension SVG. So those are the 4 types of images you can get on a web page, but the code you use to put an image on your web page is exactly the same, irrespective of what type of image you're using. The SVGs obviously scale much better, and you can scale them up and you can scale them down. So there are many advantages, but they're a bit more difficult to create. So let's go back to our page and let's come and put an image on this page. Now I've downloaded some images from onsplash.com. Actually, I downloaded some of my own images there because I've put my own images up there. So you can go to that site, and I'll put a link in the description where you can go and download 3 images that you can use on your website. So you can go and do that. I've downloaded my images and I've put them inside my images folder. So inside my images folder I've put one of them is laptop, one of them is padlock, and those are the images I'm going to be using. Again, as I said earlier lesson, all images of the same type should be inside this in the same folder. That's a very good practice. Okay, so how do we get an image onto this page? Inside here, I am going to use the figure tag to put my image in. Figure tag is a nice handy tag because you can put images in it, and then you can use the figure tag style sheets on the figure tag to scale your image accordingly. To put an image on the page, you use the img tag, and then img. So that's my img tag. And the img tag has an attribute source, src, stands for source. And that's basically saying the source of your image. Now our image is in the images folder. And notice how Visual Studio gives me a nice prompt. I click on that and it shows me all the images in my folder. If not, you would have to literally open the folder or know what the images are. So you can type in the name. And I'm going to type in the laptop image. And then you've always got the alt tag attribute. Alt is an attribute of your image tag. That's important because it is used for people that are visually disabled or people that the images might not show. So this will give them a text alternative to what image you are using. So I'm going to say picture of laptop. Now the picture I've put in there is a rather large picture. So when I go File, Save now, and I come into my page and I refresh, there's the picture of my laptop. You can see it's quite large, probably a bit too large for what we want to do here, but we can scale that down with CSS. But first of all, I'm going to show you some more attributes of the image tag. Now these attributes will be overwritten by our CSS. I'm going to give my image a width, okay? And I'm going to give it a width of 200. And I'm going to give my image a height of 300. Now, notice how the attributes work out. It is width equals in HTML, width equals, and inside double quotes, you've got your value, height equals, and inside double quotes, you've got your value. File, save, and now when I come back and look at my image, it comes down. Now, ordinarily, when you've got images like this, you would want to go into a tool like Photoshop and scale them properly. So let me just change this over to 300. I'm going to make this 200. I'm not going to do any scaling there. Normally you go into Photoshop and change the size of the image to be what exactly you want it to be. But I'm going to leave like that now. And later we can get the text to wrap around our image. But any image you are putting on your page, that is the tag that you would be using for that, to put the images onto your page. By the way, if you want to get some vector graphics, there's a site called Icon Monster, which is an excellent site where you can get loads of vector graphics, SVGs, or very nice plain text. And actually, if I come into here right now and let's go back to my whiteboard, and I'm going to go to iconmonster.com. Free icons, there we are. And here we are in Icon Monster, and here's the images that I was telling you about. You see nice simple vector graphics. I'm going to take this one, and this will give you an example of what your now you can download these, and these are absolutely free to use. I agreed to the license condition. You have to agree to that before you download it. And I'm going to download this little going back up arrow as an SVG. I just click on SVG. That's the one I want, and I want to download, and I click on download. And there it downloads, and I am going to save this into where I've been putting all my images. So online course, and inside my images folder, and I'm going to change the name of this as arrow up. You can change the name, but you can't change the extension. So it has to be the same extension. If you want to change the extension, you'd have to open a specialized tool to do that. I'm just going to call this arrow up .svg. Okay, so that's my image, arrow up.svg, and save. Good. Now back into Visual Studio Code, and I go to the bottom of my page. Just after the last p tag, I'm going to make another p tag here, and inside there I want to put in this image. So img src equals images / let me just make sure that it's in there. Here's my images. Yep, arrow up. Good. Wonder why that's not showing. Let's just make sure again. Images / there we are, arrow up svg, and I click on that, and here I can say arrow up. File, save. Now let's come back into my browser and take a look at the page. And there's the arrow up. See how large it is? But notice what's going to happen this time when I scale that image down. When I come back into my Visual Studio Code, I now want to give you a width of 20 and a height 20. I don't need to put the px there when I'm doing the width and height as values of an HTML tag. Come in here and I refresh, and you see that looks much neater and it scales perfectly. You can scale it down, you can scale it up. Those are the advantages of your SVG images. And then we're going to go on to linking, how we can link both images and our text. And that's going to be the topic of our next lesson. Linking, absolutes and relative links. Absolute links, relative links, and anchors. Now we want to see how we can make links both to our images and to our text. Now, in our navigation bar, we have the word here BBC, and that is going to become a link to the BBC website. How do we make a link? What we do is we use the ahref, that's your attribute, that's your tag. Okay, so here's what we've got. A stands for anchor, href is hyperlink reference, and inside those double quotes is going to go the address of the website you want to link to. And then inside here goes the text that we will be clicking on for that link to work. So that text, I'm just going to move that closing tag from there and put it here. That's where that should end. So notice what I've got there now. I've got a href equals double quotes. Inside double quotes is going to go the address of the BBC website. Then I've got the letters BBC. That's what we will click on for that link to work. And then I close that tag with the /a. So this ahref is another one of our container tags. Now the easiest way to get that link is to literally go to the website. Here's the BBC website, and I'm going to copy that link, copy, and back into Visual Studio Code, and inside there I paste in that link. Now let me just file save, and I'm going to turn on word wrap here. Word wrap is already turned on, good. So now you can see after my ahref, I've got the link to the BBC website. Now if I were to save this now and go back into my page and refresh, you can see it's got a line under it that tells me that it's now a link. I can remove that line if I want. And then when I click on that, you're off to the BBC website. Okay. So there we have made our text link, and we can do the same to all these pieces of text. Now we haven't made those pages yet, but I'm still going to make the links to them. Just before that, I want to make what we have down here also a link. So when I click on that, it will bring me back to the top of the page. So here's what I'm going to do. Where I go to where that arrow is, which is here, I am going to put the ahref around it. Okay, see what I've done there? And then the /a there, I'm going to take you away from there. You end after the image. So anything that is going to be the link has to be inside this tag. It's a container tag. That tag ends when you have the /a. If you don't end that /a, everything after this ahref will continue to be a link. Now, because this, I want it to go back to the top of this page. I don't want to leave this page. I use the #, top. And that would take me back to the top of the page. So I can now do file save. I go back into my browser and I refresh. Now, let me make this page slightly smaller so that you can see how it's going to work. So if I make this page smaller, good. So now when I scroll down, I get here and I click on that, it takes me back to the top of the page. And I could have done it the other way around too, to go to the bottom of the page. So that's how I have my link. So now I've made my text a link. That text for the BBC is an absolute link. That one you have there is an anchor. And now let's make a link to a page that is on your site. Now we haven't made the products page yet, but this page that we are on now is our index page. And that's what I mean by home. Your index page is always your home page. Every single website should have a link back to their homepage. And good practice is that your logo, whatever is up here, should always be a link back to your homepage. So that should be a link back to this page. So wherever people are, when they click on that, they will come back to this page. We're going to do that in another lesson. But first of all, I want to make this link here, home, a link to the index page. So this is linking it to itself, but later on it's going to be on every other page. So ahref equals, and there we are. And always remember to move this to the end of the word that you want to be the link. So I'm going to copy you and paste you there. That's where I want you to be. And this is now going to be index.html. Now, we're going to make this into a page called products. And so I'm going to do that link straight away. In this case, I'm just going to copy and paste this. So I'm taking that ahref, which says index there. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it there. And you see, it kindly helps me close it with a /a. So make sure if it does close it, you take that off from there and put it after the word products, because that's where I want that link to end. And this is going to be a page which we are going to create later on and call it products.html. So that's where you're going to stay. And we're going to do the same for the feedback. So let's put you there. So let's take this to the ahref, that whole line, copy, and put you just before the word feedback. Notice it kindly helps me close it. So take that. I don't want you to close yet. I want you to close after the word feedback. And this is going to be a link to a page called feedback. Feedback.html. Okay, good. Save. Go back into a browser, refresh. Now all of those are links. The ones that we have visited go purple. They go purple by default. The ones we haven't visited stay blue. We can't visit those yet because we haven't created them. But we're going to apply some CSS to that later on so they all maintain the same color at all times. So there we have taken a look at linking, relative links, absolute links, and anchors. There are a few other very common tags that are used on a web page, and that's what we're going to take a look at in our next lesson. Commonly used tags: block quotes, address, bold, lists. Any web page will have quite a few tags on it, and there's so many tags. But once I've introduced you to some of the common ones and you understand the whole concept of containers and empty, getting to grips with the syntax, you should be able to use any of the HTML tags that you come across. So let's come and introduce you to a few more. I've got my image tag there. Now that image tag, the very first one, I put it in a figure tag, which is very good practice. The one at the bottom, I haven't put it inside a figure tag. Remember, I said it's always good to put your tags inside a figure tag, and I'm going to do that with this one now. So I'm going to make some space here, and I am going to get rid of this p tag, which I had here, and I'm going to introduce the figure tag. Okay. And as I open that figure tag, I close it after the image. Okay, so there I've got my image. Just before the figure tag, I'm going to make another tag, and this time I'm going to call it block quotes. The block quote tag is what you use when you want to quote someone. Okay, and if you want the speech to jump out. So if I go to go file, save on this, let's see where I put the block quotes. I put some text in. Oh, God. So I've now added the figure tag around the arrow that we have at the bottom of the page. Now I'm going to introduce us to the block quotes tag. Block quote tag is what you use when you want to quote someone. So let me put some text in between and notice what it is. It's simply block quotes. And if I were to file, save, and now let's go and look at that on our page. And there you can see the block quotes. It's indented on both sides. Now, Let's put some text immediately after the block quotes. After the block quotes, I'm going to have another p tag, and I'm going to have some more text inside there. Good. And now back into browser. And there you can see the text continue as normal. We can use style sheets to make that text that is there stand out. And we will do that later on. So it's always good to have your text nice and neatly indented when you are using the block quote, because that's what we use when we're quoting someone. Then we also have the address tag, which I've already introduced you to down at the bottom of the page. We did that in an earlier lesson inside our footer. And in case you didn't notice, if I go to that, notice it comes out as italic. That's what happens with the address tag. Then you might want to make certain pieces of text on your page bold. So, for example, if at the beginning of my second paragraph, I'm going to put some text here to say, I want you bold. Okay. And to get some text bold, what I use is the B. Notice it closes it because it's a container tag. B stands for bold, and that's B where the B starts, and wherever it ends is where the text we are making bold ends on our page. So I'm going to save that back into my browser and refresh, and you can see that is bold. By the way, there's another way you can make things bold by using the strong tag. Okay, strong, it's a container. So once I start that now, I'm going to cut that from there. I'm going to put it at the end of the word I want the strong to be. I put it there, and so we can see that text. I'm going to put the word strong here. Okay, good. File save. And now come in here and refresh. And you see that's where I've got my strong. So notice that's strong and that's bold. Can you tell the difference? You can't. Bold and strong do the same thing. The difference is that strong is what is known as a logical tag. The search engine will pick it up. So you make something strong when you want to emphasize it to the search engine. You make something bold when it's just the appearance you want to change. So let's say you're putting the name of a particular person and you want it to stand out, but it's not really that important to the search engine in terms of identifying the page. So bold is when you want something just to have a cosmetic effect. Strong is when you want that word to stand out to the search engine. So if you're selling particular goods, you might want to put all those goods, the name of those goods, in strong, so you're emphasizing them to the search engine. But please don't go and make everything strong on your page, because that is trying to fool the search engines and they don't like that. Okay, then let's also look at lists. If you want to make a list, and I am going to put this on this page very soon, we're going to move on to another page because I don't want to overkill this page, but this is what I'm going to do. After my first paragraph, I want to make an ordered list, which is OL. Okay, OL stands for ordered list, and each item in the list is now an LI. So I'm going to say London. Okay, hit the carriage return, another LI, New York, and another LI, Paris. Okay, so that's how you make an ordered list. Save that, view that in browser. There you have 1, 2, 3, and it goes on and on. The good thing about an ordered list, anytime you're making numbers things, let's say after New York, I forgot that I wanted Hong Kong to come after New York. I could simply hit my space there and say Hong Kong, and everything will renumber for me. And there I've got my ordered list. Now, if I don't want it to be an ordered list because I don't want to give the impression that one is more important than ever, one is more important than another, I can use the UL instead of the OL. And the UL stands for unordered list, and that will give me bullet points. Brilliant. So we've done quite enough on this table. There are obviously loads more tags, but once you understand them, you understand the concept of containers. And when it comes to lists, you notice those are tags that have to have other tags inside them for them to work. You understand that structure, you should be able to look at any of the HTML tags and go ahead to use them. If you want to lay out things like tabular information, that's where you use tables. You don't use tables to structure your page. If you notice in the structure of this page, I didn't use tables. If you want to structure your page, you want different boxes in different places, that's where the div tags come on. But if you want to have tabular information, that's where you use the table tag. And that's what we're going to be looking at next in our next lesson. Thank you very much. HTML tables. Tables are used for presenting tabular information to a user. They're also used for emails when you want to send out HTML as emails, but that's not something I'm going to cover in this course. So how do you make tables? Now for this, we're going to use a different page. Now, if you've been following me along, you would have had this page. There's also a link in the description where you can download a copy of it from the web, CodePen. This page is now my templates, and so I want to create another page. I want to create this products page. And to do that, all I'm simply going to do is to go File, Save As, and I'm going to save this as products.html and save. Now, anytime you make a new page, you should always change the title to reflect that. This page is going to be about tables. Let's start that with a capital T. Tables. Tabular information presentation. Okay. Company name is going to be the same. Here, I'm going to change this to tables. HTML tables. Okay. Good. So that's the new content of my H1 tag. And I don't want this text that is there now. So I'm going to get rid of all that text all the way down to my HR there. All that can go. Good. File save. Now, when I come back into my browser and refresh, so this is my index page. Now, the products page is the one I've just made. I click on that. Here's the page that has now got HTML tables. And I go back to home. It goes back to my home. So now you can see the links working. If it appears that there's a slight movement in the page, that's simply because this page has got a scroll bar because the text is much longer. And that scroll bar takes up some space. When I click on products, it doesn't have a scroll bar. So that's why there's more room on the page. So it looks like there's movement. There isn't. Okay. So let's now come and create our tables. To create a table, we use the table tag. Okay. Tables is made up of rows and columns. So first of all, I want to have my table head. For that, I use the T head. It's made up of rows and columns. So first of all, I'm going to make a row. And I make a row with a TR. Okay, that's table row. And inside my row, I'm going to have a table head. And here, I'm going to say product. Let's make that a capital. Actually, yeah, let's make that a capital. It doesn't really matter because I could have changed that with style sheets. So that is product. Okay. And then let's say here we have got the quantity. And here we are going to have the price. Okay. File save. I haven't given my table any width. So if I come back into my browser and refresh, you almost don't see anything. So let's add a bit of style to our table so you can see something. We did look at style sheets earlier on. I'm going to look at them again, but quick trip back to our style sheet. Now I've got a style sheet on this page, if you haven't been following along, called daily style inside the CSS folder. So I'm going to open that up. Here it is. And I am going to add a style for my table. So I am going to say table, and let's give it a border style of solid. File save. Now when we come back into our table, you can see that line going all the way around it. Let's come back into here too and also give it a width of 90%, and that will be 90% of the cell that it's sitting in. There we are. Okay, so back into our HTML page. Here's our products. That's my table header. That just tells me it's the header. That's just additional information, that T header. If you didn't put that T header there, it would still work fine. But T header is important for web accessibility, for people that are visually disabled. Their browser would give them a bit more information, will let them know that that is the header of the table, which is very handy because to us that have the advantage of sight, we can see that straight away, but for others, they might not. So then you have T body, which tells me that this is now the body of my table. Okay. And again, I'm going to have a table row. And so this row is going to be sitting immediately under the products. And let's say this is laptops. Okay, so that's going to be sitting under products. And then I'm going to have another table row. And let's say this is how many have we got in stock. I'm going to say we've got 10,000 items in stock. Okay, and then for price, I'm going to say the ones we have in stock are 3,000. Whether you're pounds or dollars, you can add that in yourself. File save. So now we've got, take two. So we've got T body stands for table body. So this tells us where the body of the table starts. Then we want to have another row, which is TR for table row. And inside this row, we want to have a TD, which stands for table definition. It's the way you make the cell. So this is going to be the cell immediately under product. And here, let's say we want to say laptops. Okay, so laptops will be immediately under products. And then we have another TD for the quantity. And let's say here we've got 10,000 in stock. And then we have another TD, and the price of these ones range from 1,000 to 3,000. You can add whether it's dollars or pounds. Okay, file save. Refresh. Now notice what happens here. The table rows are aligned to the left. The table headers are centered. That's why they're not lining up. Now I'm just going to put one little thing here so you can see it. I'm going to take this out later on because I don't really need it. I just want to put it there so you can see what is going on. I'm going to say border equals 1. Now that's gone in red because we're not supposed to be using that particular attribute anymore. But you see what it does? It turns on all the borders inside the cell so you can see very clearly what is happening. So my table headers are sitting in the center of the cell, whereas my contents of the cells are all aligned left. And that's why they don't match up. Okay. Border is an old tag that's now been deprecated. We're not supposed to use that anymore. Visual Studio Code will, if it's aware, it will give you those little prompts, and something goes red, you know something's wrong. Okay, so what we can do to make everything line up in our CSS, we can say we want our table header, that's the TH, that's what we use to create it. We want it to be aligned. We want table header, text align left. Okay, table header, text align left. Good, file save. And now when we go back to our page and we refresh, they've all aligned left and they all now nicely match up. And let's go and back into our HTML page and take off this thing that is upsetting our code, and let's see what this looks like now. File save and refresh. There we are. Okay, let's add a few more items. So we've got laptops. We want to add another item. We simply have another table row. Okay, TD. And let's also have mobile stands. And we have 5,000 of these in stock. And they're going for between 20 to 30 pounds. Fresh. There we are. Let's put in 2 more items. So another table row. Another TD. And this time we are going to have computer stands. We've only got 20 in stock. And they're going for 35. And one more. We've got mouse mats. Mouse mats, of course, should be inside our TD. We've got 50 in stock. And they're going for £5. So there we are. We can make our table look much neater by applying CSS to it, and we will be doing that later. In our next lesson, however, we are going to look at forms, how we can get information back from our user, and that's going to be the topic of our next lesson. HTML forms. Forms is how we collect information back from our user. And we're going to use the pages. Forms is how we get information back from our user. We're going to use the template that we've been using all along. So back into our page, we can take this page, the products.html, and we have earlier created a link to a feedback.html. There's a link to how you can download all these pages in the description. You can get them from CodePen. So I now want to create feedback.html from this page. I'm simply going to say File, Save As, and this is going to be feedback.html and save. Anytime you save a page, make sure you always change the title. Very important. So this is going to be forms. This is going to be feedback from user. Feedback from users. And also the heading of this page is going to be HTML forms. And I don't want the table there, so everything from this table going down all the way down to that HR can go. Good. Good. File save. Now back into our browser, and if I refresh, so now that is a link to the home page. That's a link to the products page. This is a link to the feedback page. And that's a link to the BBC page. So we've nearly finished this nice small mini site. So forms in HTML starts with the tag form. Always has an action. I'm going to put some space in between these two tags there. Brilliant. and I'm going to have my form fields. Now, the form action is where your form gets sent to, and that's going to be a server-side page. This course will not cover that, but it would probably look something like / the name of the page, and it could be a PHP or ASP, anything like that. Something like that is what it would look like. Okay, I'm just going to put a hash there now because I don't want us to click it for it to go anywhere. Okay, then I'm going to have some form fields, and I'm going to put that inside the field sets tag. The field set tag is very useful for web accessibility because it simply means for those that are visually impaired, the form sets will inform their browser how many sets of forms there, how many sets fields there are in this form. So that's very handy. Then let's start with a simple p tag, and in here, let's say we want to ask for the person's name. So that's a simple name tag. That's the name label. And actually, I am going to introduce the label to you straight away. So then we've got the field set there. So now we've got the field set. Now let's start with a p tag, and we're going to be asking for their name. Let's make that a capital N. That's simply a label that we want the user to be able to type in. We're going to ask for their name. And I'm going to put a BR. A BR is a line break. We looked at that earlier on because I want there to be a break after that name. And then we're going to have the input. Is the input field that we use to get the information from them. And in this case, it's going to be a simple text box. So input type is text. Name is, you can give it any name you like. No spaces there. I'm going to call it your name because that's what we're asking them. And the ID, always very good to have an ID because that works with a lot of things, with CSS, with JavaScript. I'm going to call the ID Y name. Okay. And then that p tag ends that there. Now, just to show you where one of the IDs, how the ID can be used in one particular case, in here, I'm going to introduce the label tag. I'm going to introduce you to the label tag. Okay. The label tag goes around the label. So I'm going to move this label inside this tag here. It is a container tag, as you could probably guess now. You must be familiar with containers and empty tags by now. Once you are, you can pick up any tag and use it. Once you know whether it's a container, it's an empty tag. The BR is an empty tag. The label is a container tag. Container tags contain information, which means when you open them, you've got to close them. And I'm going to give it the for to be exactly the same as the ID of that form. Very important. So that is Y name. Okay. So notice what we've got here. The p tag, which starts my new paragraph. Then I've got label, and that's the label there. And that label applies to this box, which is asking for their name. And it's input type is text. There's different values. You've got text, you've got emails, you've got numbers. Now, if I were to save this and to look at this in browser, notice what happens when I click on the name itself. My cursor goes into that box straight away. Very important, because when building websites, you must always bear in mind mobile devices. On a web page, that might be quite small. If someone's got big fingers, they're trying to click on the box, but they click on the word name by mistake, it wouldn't make a mistake because you've associated the label with that box. The cursor will go straight inside the box, and they will be able to fill in their name. Okay, so we've got their name. Let's add another box. So another P, another label, and we're going to use this one Y email. That's what the ID I'm going to give to that label. So here I'm going to ask for their email, and then I'm going to have a BR, and then I'm going to have an input, and this is going to be email. If you put colon and email, it will complete it for you. So input type is email, name is, let's be consistent and call it your email, your name, your email. And the ID must always be the same as the for. So ID there is going to be Y email, which means that when I click on that email, the cursor will immediately come into this box. So I've got a box for a name, got a box for an email. If I wanted a box for a number, it would simply be type is number. So let's do something else apart from boxes. Let's say we want a drop-down menu. To do a drop-down menu, again, let's start with P first. And I'm going to say select your town or choose your town. And then here I want the select. Okay, that also got a name and it's got an ID. And then inside here, so in here, I'm going to call it, the name I'm going to call it is going to be your town. And let's give it an ID of Y town. And then here, I'm going to have value. Then here I'm going to have my option. And then the value. So here you literally put the town in. So I'm going to say a London. That's what gets sent back to the server. This is what the user was going to see. London. Now again, I haven't put in my label here. So let's do that also. So here I can have label. We all know how that works now. So the for that label is going to be Y town. So when they click on choose your town, it comes straight into there. And so inside here, we simply put in the list of all our towns. So why don't I just make up a few towns in the United Kingdom? So we're going to have London, Cardiff, Bristol, York. So we've got London, Cardiff, Bristol. Make sure I change all these two. So that's going to be Cardiff. That's going to be Bristol. That's going to be York. And this, let's have Manchester. I have purposely made all the values lowercase and all the labels here uppercase, because uppercase here, this doesn't really matter, but those will have to correspond with what you've got on the server. So that's why I've done that. But you could have left them all in uppercase. You just change what you have on the server too. Okay, so let's see what this is going to look like. Let's just save that, come back into here and refresh. And here you are. Okay, good. And if we look at that in the browser, we have our drop down and there we have our towns. And we can make all those look much neater when we apply style sheets to it. But let's just come and round up what we have on our form. So we had the forms there. Now we want to make a password box. Now for the name and the email, the main difference between that and a password box is that if I were to go back into my form you'd notice that if I'm typing in the name, you can see whatever I'm typing in there. The email, you can see whatever I'm typing in there. But if you wanted a password box where you're asking people to supply their password, you don't want it to be obvious when it's being typed out. If not, someone standing behind them would be able to see it. So here I'm making another p tag. So here I'm making another p tag, and I'm going to have another label. And let's have a BR, a line break there. And let's bring this down one and have a BR here. That's for a line break. That's one of your empty tags. And here I'm going to say password. Okay, so we're asking for a password. I put it in between the label, and then I'm going to have my inputs. Now, one input type is password, so you can see that there. Input type is password. Name is your password. So once you get a naming convention, it's good habit that you stay with it. It makes things a lot more orderly. And for my ID, I'm going to call it y pass, y pass. Okay. So this label will also take on the same y pass. And there you have it. Now, notice the difference with your password field is when I go into my browser and refresh the page, you start typing into the password and you don't see it. Now, you can have a little checkbox where people can click on so that the password they're typing can be seen. That's normally done with JavaScript, so I won't be going there in this course, but I do cover it in the JavaScript course. Okay. So here we have our form out, and let's just add a few more elements to our form before we round up forms. So notice all of this is still taking place inside the field set. And now I want to have a radio button. This is when you are asking closed questions. So I start my P again, and I have my label, and I'm going to say, what is your gender? Okay, any question where the answer has to be limited to a few choices is where the radio button comes in, because it's allows you to force them to make a choice. So here I said, what is your gender? It could be anything. Let's say you are offering a course in only 2 venues. They can't take it in both. So you could say, what venue do you want? Or even to be more, so that they can know they're choosing, you can say choose a venue. So here with our radio buttons, we are going to ask them to choose a venue. So we're going to say choose a venue. That's what radio buttons are for. Radio buttons are when you are forcing people to make a particular choice. So then we've said choose a choice, and let's bring this down. Let's put a line break there. And now I'm going to say the choices. So let's say we only have choices in London. And now here's where I have my radio button. It's inputs. And this type is going to be radio. So you got input type is radio, name is, and I'm going to call this Y venue, your venue. And I'm going to make that YVENUE. And that will be exactly the same. Okay. And I'm going to put a BR at the end of that line. And I'm going to copy this because only a few things change in all of these. So let's say we've only got 3 venues where we run this course. Okay, you can either in London, in York, or in Bristol. Okay, so they're all radio buttons. They all share the same name. They all share the same ID. So how do you know which one is they choose? This is where another attribute comes in, which is value. And here's where they differ. So in this value, I have London. In this value, we have York. And in the last one, we have Bristol. Okay, so that's how you do radio buttons. And now notice what's going to happen. When I go into my form, refresh, I am forced to make a choice of one. I can't choose all three. So that's where radio buttons come in. On the other hand, if I were to make checkboxes, so let's start our P again. Let's have our label again. And let's make another line down here, put in our BR. And this time it's going to be inputs. And the type is going to be checkbox. Okay. And say here I am saying, let's give this an ID. So let's call this Y course. And this is going to be your course. And the form must always match the ID of the form so as to allow the label to be attached to the form. And here I'm going to say choose courses you want to attend. Okay, have a BR there. And so the first one I'm going to put will be HTML. Let's have a BR, line break. Then let's have CSS. And again, why don't we make this quicker? I'm just going to copy the whole of that. And I'm just going to put in 3 courses too. Okay, so I've got HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Okay, and again, you enter in the values. Let's turn on word wrap. Okay. So choose courses you want to attend. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And when we go file save and back into our browser and refresh, this case with the courses, you are allowed to choose all of them. So that's checkboxes. With radio boxes, you are only allowed to choose one. Final form field I'm going to introduce you to is when you're asking for feedback. You're expecting them to put in a comment. And so here I'm going to say comments, your comments. And again, let's have a line break. Let's have a BR. And then we have our text area. Okay, now notice text area is very different. Text area is a container tag. Our input boxes are empty tags. Our input boxes with checkbox, it's radio tag. The one with the input box with radio is an empty tag. But in the case of the text area, notice where I put my cursor. Well, nothing actually goes there, but it's important you leave that space there. So now I've got text area name. What do we call it? Y comments, or your comments to be, or your comms. Let's call it your com. Okay. The ID, I'm going to call it YCOM, and that's that. Make sure the label is marked up to be linked to our text area box so that when people click on your comments, it will go into that box. Notice I've got rows and columns. That's important. That's how you get the size of your text area with columns and rows. Now, you can play about with those, but if I were to save this and go back in and refresh, so you see what you've got there. Although most browsers now you can physically expand that, but the user probably won't know how to do that. So if I just refresh that, you see the size of the box you've got there. And if I click on comments, it goes in there. All of these labels now should be working so that when I click on them, brilliant, it goes straight into the box. Now with this choose your town, because this is a choose thing, if you leave it like this and they don't make a choice, the first one will be selected by default. So with that particular box, which is your select box, this is what I'm going to do. I am going to introduce another option here. And in this case, I'm going to say, make a choice. And then here I say, select one. Now, to be absolutely sure that one is selected, notice what I've put here. I've put selected. This is one of those attributes that does not need a value. By putting selected there, it simply indicates that that should be the first one selected. So if they don't take anything, that would be the one selected. And if I were to get that back in my server, I would know they have not made any particular choice. So let's file save, take a look at our form again, and good, everything's looking nice. Now it says select one, and they literally do have to make a selection. The last thing missing on our form now is the submit button. So we come back to the end of our form field, and I am going to say input, submit. So input type is submit. The value is, this is what will appear on the submit button. I'm going to say send. I don't necessarily have to give it an ID, but I am, in case you want to do anything with it from making it tidy or things like that. So let's give it an ID, y sub. And let's also give it a name for the sake as if we wanted to use JavaScript on it later on. For the name, I'm going to call it submit button. Okay. Now this form, remember I mentioned earlier on that when you're making a form, the action is where it will go to. And then you also have a method, which is another attribute. And in the method, you've got two options. You put post or get. There's also dialog that does something slightly different. But post or get determines how the information is sent. If you use get, the information will be sent as a query string, which can have security implications if you're asking for a password. So if you're ever asking for a password, make sure you use post. If you're not, then you can use get, because if you use get, it means people can bookmark the result. If you use post, the information goes as a stream and it will not show in the query string. And I'll demonstrate what I mean by that. So let me start by making this get. Now, Earlier on, we made this form, we made the action to be equal to hash, which means it's going nowhere. But I'm going to send this now back to my index.html. Now, you would never normally send a page back to an HTML page because nothing's going to happen. The moment they send off that form, the information is lost. But because we don't have any server side that I can demonstrate to you here, this is an HTML course, I don't want to go into server side, we could use a piece of PHP which would collect the information from that form and then send it on to an email address or something like that. So for now, this will just send it back to the HTML form and you will see how it operates, but it's not going to be fully functioning. So let's save this and come back into our form and refresh the page. And there you see that's where we had our submit button. Now we want to send this. So let's fill this in. I'm just going to make up a dummy email. And I'm not going to use any real password, just type in some gibberish there. Select a town, select a venue, courses, and any comments, and hit the send button. And look up in the query string. That's what I mean by the query string. All the information typed into the form is displayed in the query string. That's what happens when you use get. Now, it does have its advantages, because if you were sending something to a database and you wanted to remember that information or send the result to someone else, you could bookmark this page, or you could simply copy all that and send it to someone, and they will be sending the same information to the database and get the same result that you got. So using get does have its values. On the other hand, if we were to go back to our form and change that get to post, back into our form, refresh. Let's go back to feedback form. Good. So that form is refreshed. Now fill in my form again. Back into my form. Fill in my form again. And hit send. Notice this time there is no information in the query string. That's because I was using post and it goes as a stream. So those are the two things that's very important that you note when you are working with forms. Okay. Our page is now looking much better, but we could tidy up a bit more. And that's the work for style sheets. And so in our next lesson, we're going to return to style sheets, see if we can tidy things up a bit more. Style sheets for styles. Okay, if you've been following along, you'll be familiar with the page that you can see on your screen right now. We have built a HTML page. Let's come into it here. Here is our home. Here is our products page, feedback, and that will take us off to the BBC. That was an absolute link. We now want to come and tidy this page up a bit. Now let's start from the top, working down, just to show you again how CSS can be used to change and make nice and neat every element on your page. At the top of your page, we have got our company name. Now that could be an image, could be anything at all. In our case, it's a piece of text. And it should always be a link back to your home page. When people come to your page, if they are lost, they should be able to click on your logo or your company name that is at the top of your page, and that should take them back to your home page. So here's what we're going to do first of all. Come back into, now that appears on every single page. And here it is, where we've got our header 2. That's where that appears. First things is I want that to look a little bit smaller. It's quite large, nothing wrong with that, but it would be nice if it's a bit smaller. Now that H2 is inside the header tag. Now I go into my style sheets. If I was simply to go into here and say H2 and then apply a style to it. Let me say font size, and let's make it 80% of what it currently is. Okay, that's going to make it smaller, but not significantly smaller. Okay, now the only problem there is that any other H2 on this page or anywhere in our site that is using the same style sheet would also be affected. We don't want that. So here's what I'm going to do. I don't want every H2 to take on that property. I only want the H2s that are inside the header tag. Okay, the H2s that are inside the header tag. And this is what we call a contextual selector. Now, let me come here. If I do /*, this is a comment. I've said that before. This is how you do comment tags. And here I'm going to say this is a contextual selector. Okay, */. By the way, if you want to make comments inside your HTML, you can also do that by using the HTML comment tag. And here it is. It's how you do it. So any text you want to appear on your page as a comment, in other words, the user won't be able to see it, you put it inside these comment tags. So you have to have that part. So the less than sign, exclamation mark, 2 hyphens, then you add any comments you want there, and then it ends with 2 hyphens and the greater than sign. You want to see the comments, and this is the feedback page. If I were to right click on this and open it in browser, and now refresh first of all, so you can't see any comments here. But if I right click and I click on view page source and I go into my page, there you can see the comment tag on that line 15. But it does, and you can do that on any page, by the way. Just right click and you can go to the source code and see the source code of the page that you are viewing. Okay, so back into our style sheets. And we want a contextual selector, remember, so we only want the H1s that are inside the header. And here's how we do it. Header space H2. Now that says it's only the headers that are inside the H2 that will be affected. Now if we go File, Save, back into our page and refresh, it would still be the same. Now I'd like a bit more space around my H2 there. It's too far to the top, and that is fine. That's not a problem with the tag. It's just because of, it's not a problem with the tag. It's just because I want how my design to look. So I'm going to give it a padding. And when I say padding, this will be a padding all the way around. Now that box is 50 pixels. So if I said 10px and File, Save and refresh, very nice. So that now moves down a lot better. Now I also want to make it a link. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back in my style sheets and back into my page. And I want to make this a link. So here I am going to say, remember how we do our links? A space href equals and that's how you make your links. And remember, when you make your link like that, the text that goes inside here becomes the link, and it's only when it says the /a that it stops being a link. So all of this word that says company name, I want you to be inside there. Much better. File, Save. Now come back into here and refresh. There you are. It's a link. And it's gone purple because anytime a link has been visited, it goes purple. But we are going to change the color of that to make it stand out. Again, that will be done with CSS. But when I click on this now, I haven't put in the link yet. That will go back to where it's coming. So where it's supposed to go. So here I've got ahref. There's nothing in here, and I'm going to put index.html. File save. Refresh. Now click on that, and I'm back into the home page. That's good. Okay. So this link for our header should be on every single page. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to open up my index page. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to go on the index page because the index page won't be linking to itself, but it's actually a good habit to put it there, because if you use in your index page as your template, then you've got a consistency throughout. So I'm going to save that. Also means people might be on the home page and not realize it and click on it and then be reassured that they now are on the home page. And this was the one for the products page where we put our table. So I'm going to put that on there too. Good. And file save. And now back into my page. That's home, products, feedback, products page, feedback page, the home page. So they're now all consistent. So that's good. Now, in our index page, I just want to make one of the words here a link, just so I can show you something. So on my index page, here we are, going into this page. I want to take one of the words here. Let's take let's turn on the word wrap. That's better. So here I'm going to go down to this paragraph where I've got I want you to be bold. Immediately after that, I'm going to say see our products page. See our products page, and this is going to be a link to our products page. Okay, always closes that link for you. So take the closing tag, and you want to make sure the closing tag appears after the last word you want to be the link. And then inside here we put products.html. Very good. File save. Back into browser, refresh. Now when I click on that, we come here to the products page. When I click on home, I come feedback, or I can click on the company. Okay, now let's continue our tidying up. Now, first of all, you see the company, I've got company and a small case n. It's good to have a consistency throughout. We want all of these first letters here to be capitalized throughout the site. And so we could type them in, but I haven't done that because I know that I can enforce uniformity through the style sheets. So here is what I'm going to do is I am going to say that when the H2 is inside the header tag, that's our contextual selector, I also want the text transform capitalize. Okay, text transform capitalize. That will make sure that the first letter of every word is capitalized. File save. Refresh. Now you can see that's capitalized. Very good. Now let's come and sort out our links. That link has gone purple, and so has all of them, all the pages we visited. When the link is on the page, especially part of your article, it's good it stands out by having it underlined in a different color. That makes it easy for people to see it. So what we're going to do here is now, I'm going to, for the links are created with the A tag. So I'm going to say A for anchor, and I am going to give it a color of red. That's brown. That would stick out quite nice also. Crimson, and it actually gives you the hexadecimal values. That's quite nice. Actually, didn't put it in there. So I'm going to say hash. Let's try that again. Okay, good. So it's A52A2A. Okay, so that's now going to be the color of all my links. There we are. They are all taken on the same. But for the link that is in the header, I don't want that red. White would be a much better color. And nor do I need it underlined because it's quite instinctive that you can click on it. So coming back again into my style sheet, I am going to say for header, when an A is inside the header, that's how I do it, contextual selector, we did that earlier on. I want the color to be white. Now, one of the nice things it does here is all the colors you've been using, all the hexamer values that you've been using so far, Visual Studio Code will show you to them. So I want that one to be white. But I also want the text decoration to be none. That means it won't be underlined. File save, refresh. And notice that only applies to the one in the header. So now only the one in the header has not got any underline, is white. And when you click on it, and home, click on that, it comes back here. Now you see my links here have the same problem. Some are in uppercase, some are in lowercase. Again, let's go and enforce that. So those are my links that are inside my nav bar. So here's what I'm going to do. Nav, A, this contextual selector, and I'm going to say color, text, transform, capitalize. Okay. Good. Now we could keep them all red. That's not bad. I could change their color, but I don't want to take the underline away from them because it's pretty obvious. If I wanted to change their color, I could simply put it here with color. But I don't want to change their color. I just want to say text, decoration, none. File save, refresh. Much better. So you see I can change the color of the links depending on where they are located by using CSS, and that's an advantage of using structural tags. Now let's come and make our images responsive. We come into our images here, but let me show you where we could have a problem. If the image was larger than that and a device came along which was smaller, obviously we have given this page a maximum width, but it can go as small as the device would allow. So we want to do the same with our image. And here's what we're going to do. In my style sheets, I am going to set the width, the figure, that's what the image is sitting in, okay? I'm going to give that a width of 50%. So it's going to be 50% of what it's sitting in, okay? And then for my image, I'm going to give you a width of 100%. So again, it's 100% of what it's sitting in, and a height of auto. You can work out the height itself. So when you make your image, you would make it obviously to the size you want it to be. So let's say your image was 400 by 400. And then a mobile device comes, which is only 300 in width. That image will shrink accordingly in proportion to the size of what it's in. So now I save that. I come back into my page. And now you see that's good because the image, I've said, be 100% of what you're sitting in. So it's 100% of the figure, which is half of the article, which is 940. But when, and we can use our developer tools here. Another way to get to developer tools is click on that little icon there and come down to your more tools and developer tools. Good. And now I'm going to select an iPhone SE, and you can see how my image gets smaller accordingly. If I make it go back into my page, it gets larger. So that's a nice way of doing your images, which will make everything size accordingly. Now, on the other hand, however, my arrow, I did not want that for my arrow. So here's what I'm going to do. Coming back into my style sheets. And the reason why that has happened is because I've said IMG, that applies to all the images. So I haven't showed you classes yet. This is a brilliant example on how to show you a class. We've looked at an ID. When you're referring to an ID in your style sheet, you use the hash sign. And the main difference between IDs and classes, what we're about to use now, is that IDs must be unique on your page. So where we've got ID wrapper inside our div tag, just to remind you, inside our div tag, we've got ID wrapper. That name we've put there must be unique on this page. You can't use wrapper more than once. But with a class, you can use classes several times. So on this page now, if I go down to the bottom where I have got my arrow, here it is, I am going to give this image tag a class of WRD. That's the name I'm going to give that class. File save. Done this on my index page. Come back here now. Now I want to refer to that class, and I do that with a full stop. So when I'm referring to an ID, it's a hash. When I'm referring to a class, it's a full stop. Okay? And now these properties, I'm going to apply them to a class. Now there's something else you can do here. If I just left this class as it were, you might come back later and think, where was I using that class? You could insert the name of the tag you're applying it to in front of it there. Now, the only advantage of doing this means that you can now only use this class with the IMG tag. But that might be what you want, so that's not a problem. I'm going to comment this out. Okay? To do a comment, it is /* and then * at the end of the line. So that line has been commented out. It's another little trick you can use. Another little trick you can use when you want to comment things out in your code, you can simply do that. It means that if you want to bring them back later on, you can. Now in this case, I've now made a class which is I'm going to apply to the image tags that I want that resizing to apply to. So when I come back to my index page, I have applied that class to my arrow. I don't want it on the arrow because the arrow is fine. I want it to maintain that width and that height. In the case of images, the attributes width and height can be overruled in the CSS. The attributes and values in your tags can be overruled by your CSS, especially in the case of images. Okay, so I don't want that there, file save. I want that to apply to the main image up here, which is my laptop. So now I'm going to put class is RWD, file save. Come back into here. Refresh. Now that's still, so brilliant, that's fine. And that's gone back to how it was before because the class is only applied to that particular image. Still looking at our CSS, let's come and tidy up this box we've got here. That is our block code. And this is just to show you how you can apply CSS to every single element on your page. That's my block code. I come into here and I'm going to say block code. That's the name of the tag. It's not a class. It's a simple tag which is recognizable. And I want to say border style. Let's give it a solid border style. Yep. Let's also say border width. I'm going to give it 1 pixel. That's the width of its border. And then I want some space in there. So I'm going to say padding. Padding will be padding all the way around within the box. I'm going to give it a padding of 6px. And so this is going to stand out even more. I'm going to give it a background color. Very light gray. Let's turn on the word wrap here. And let's also change the font size. Let's make it 120%. 130. Let's make it really stand out. Okay, so on the block code. File save. Refresh. And you see what you get now. That stands out quite nice and neat. Now we've made a lot of changes on this page, and it's always good that you check your page as you go along. Unfortunately, there are many places on the web where you can go to validate your code. And that's what we want to do now. And you should always do that as you work along. So here we are. Make your way to the browser and make your way to validator.w3.org. Put a link to it in the description. You can click on that and you'll get the page that you see here. Then there's several ways you can validate. You can validate by uploading the file, or you can validate by direct inputs, or you can validate by URI if the page was on the web. In our case, we're going to validate it by uploading the file. So I'm going to click upload the file, and then it says choose file. And make your way to your folder. Here's I'm in the online course, and the file I want to validate is the index.html, because that's the one we've made all the changes in that we've completed. I click on that and I click on open, and there we are. It's got the page, and then you say check, and it will upload that page. Check, upload the page, and good. Document checking completed, no errors or warnings to show. That's very good. Now, if there was something wrong, let me go and put an error on the page so you can see. So if I come in here now, I am going to not close this LI here. Okay. So if I'm going to get rid of this, saved before actually, file save. So this is my index page. Yeah. So file save. And let me just put some other text here. So file save. I come back into this page. Let me just check this. So I'm going to go back into here. I'm going to refresh. Good. So I can see that is there. So I know you've got an error in that now. So let's go back to where we want to do our check-in. Refresh this. Good. Select, choose file, index, open, check. Good. And now it tells you inside the OL, and so it will give you where the errors are and even gives you the line numbers. So that's useful to know for file checking. Now let's have another word about building responsive websites. That's going to be our next lesson. Building responsive websites. The page we have made so far is actually responsive. What we mean by responsive is that if a device comes along that is got a smaller viewable area, and remember, you can always do this by going to your developer tools, which nearly all browsers have built into them, and seeing what your page looks like in a smaller device. Now, there are the errors we put in our page from the last exercise. So I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to put back the UL. Good. And put back here the closing LI. Good. File save. So when building a page, always make sure that it is responsive. And we have built a simple layout, but we could also use CSS media queries. Although with the advances in style sheets, you could probably build a page now without using CSS media queries and get your page to be fully responsive. We're going to look at CSS, more at CSS in another course, and we'll cover that then, because I want this one to be nice, short and snappy, and it's still longer than I thought it would be. So making a website responsive is something you should always bear in mind. Think mobile first is the approach to that. When building your website, see what it looks like in a mobile site first, and then scale it up for the other devices. And the main thing we are using here, if I go back to my CSS, is what we have on our wrapper. Line 8, this is my CSS. The maximum width is 940, which means it can get as small as it wants. And notice when I come to my images, I am using percentages for the widths and for the heights. So I'm never going to run into a problem. Finally, let's look at entities. HTML entities. HTML entities is how you can use those special characters that appear on your keyboard. So for example, in my address here, let's do this where I've got my address, and let's see what this looks like in the page first of all. Okay, that's fine. So if I come back into here after if I got my word wrap on, yes, after this, I am going to have another hyphen and I'm going to say copyright. I want the copyright sign, and the entities always stand with the ampersand, copy, semicolon. And I'm going to say 2022. Why are you up? Can I move you down a bit? Good. Ampersand, copy, 2022. And that's going to give me the copyright sign. And those are what we mean by entities. Now, you can have a search for them. There are absolutely loads of entities. The entities for the copyright sign, for the trademark sign, even for the speech marks that you would get around these. And I know it might be tempting if you have speech marks on your keyboard, just when you come into the block code, to simply do something like this, because that works when you are using them inside your tags, especially when you're using them as speech marks around your values. That is completely value. But here I want the speech mark which appears in my text, and so that you will consistently get the same thing across all platforms, because different languages have different keyboards. Use the entity sign for that, which is ampersand QUOT semicolon. That's the entity sign for the speech marks. You can always Google those and you'll get a whole list of entity signs. You just simply type in HTML entities, you will get a whole list of them. And good enough, Visual Studio Code gives you loads of them. Okay, file save. Back into the browser, refresh. And there you are, you've got your speech marks. So that brings us to the end of the HTML fundamentals. Obviously, haven't covered absolutely everything you can get in HTML, but it has covered the basics enough to get you up and running. If you are new to front-end development, it's an excellent course. You'll find other courses that you can go on that might cover things in greater depth, other aspects of HTML that I haven't covered, but the syntax and the structure will be exactly the same. And if you are an experienced front-end developer, maybe it's just been a joy going through this, reminding yourself of a few things. If you have any comments, please do add them at the bottom. Please do click like on this if you have liked it, and please remember to subscribe so that as other courses come out, you will be able to be informed. Thank you very much, and go and enjoy your HTML CSS coding.